Free audio post-production by Alphonic.com.
Hi, I'm Sean, and you're listening to The 3-Month Vacation. I was about 2 years old when I first had a bout of convulsions. I was in the balcony looking out on the road, and then I fell off the stool that I was standing on. And as the story goes, I ran to my mother. She noticed that I was having convulsions and she panicked. Now, panic would be the wrong word to use because what she did next was to bundle me up in her arms and run with me to the hospital. To put you in the frame of mind of what India was when I was growing up, there were no phones, or at least most people didn't have phones. They didn't have cars. You probably had a scooter if you were well off. That's just how things were back then. What my mother had to do was to run a distance of about 2 kilometers to get to the nearest hospital. When she got to the hospital, they wouldn't admit me because I had meningitis and the hospital was not in a position to deal with any case of meningitis. Somehow, she managed to get them to admit me. At that point in time, they asked for the mother. Now, my mother was very young at that point, and they assumed that somehow she was the sister. They just wouldn't admit me. No, they said, you have to get the mother. This was odd behavior on the part of the hospital staff because people tend to get married very early in India. Yet they were insisting that they had to have the mother before they could go ahead with anything. There I was, struggling quite a lot, and the hospital authorities were stuck in a loop of bureaucracy. Somehow, my mother convinced them to admit me. However, the prognosis was grim. The doctor wasn't so sure that I would survive the meningitis. I have to tell you this, he said to my parents. Your son will either die or he'll go mad. You knew the end of the story almost as soon as you started listening to it. You know that I didn't die, obviously, and yeah, I get the joke. I went mad. But there was something else happening, and that riveted you to the story, and that was the feeling of getting stuck. If you've been listening to these podcasts, we've been doing quite a few on storytelling, and this one is the most interesting of all. I'll tell you why. It is because storytelling is about the point where you get stuck. The point where you've been running from someone and you run down the alley and there's a wall. There's no way forward. There's no way back. You're stuck. This is the crux of storytelling. When you tell a story, there are ups and downs. They always have to be ups and downs because that's what keeps the pace going. If you have too many downs, maybe the listener or the reader can get a little not so great. If you have too many ups, well, that story works, but I'll explain why we don't want to have so many of those stories. But the story that you love, the episodes that you want to watch on Netflix, all of those things, they have a point very quickly where somebody gets stuck and they can't get out of it. And they don't know how to get out of it. And that's the whole point. The point is that you don't know what they're going to do next. They don't know what they're going to do next. And somehow something happens that gets you to say, oh, they got out of that trap. That's precisely what you felt when you heard the meningitis story. Yes, I fell off a stool and you got bump, and then my mother had to run with me to the hospital because there were no cars and there was no phone and no tuk-tuks or anything of that sort. And yes, there are those downs, but where is the point where things go really bad? And that is when I am at the hospital, when the doctors are right in front and they won't admit me to the hospital because they're looking for the mother. They're looking for an adult, and they won't accept that my mother is the real mother. They think she's the sister. How do you get out of this? This is the crux of storytelling. That you start off your story with a point where you're going to get stuck. And sometimes it's 3 lines, 4 lines, 5 lines. And there is no way out of it. This is where you need to start your story. Think of that point where you're going to get stuck and then work backwards from it. Because you're going to have ups and downs right until that point. And then you're going to get stuck. And sometimes you can get stuck right at the beginning, and sometimes much later, maybe towards the end. In the meningitis story, it was more like in the middle. And it doesn't matter. Because as long as you've got ups and downs, as long as you're falling down that staircase and then recovering and falling down and recovering, well, the reader, the listener is going to be with you. But at some point, you have to get stuck. Because that is the high intensity, the peak of everything. And we're just going on a trip with Otis. This is from The Moth, which is a really good storytelling option if you want to listen to stories on a regular basis. And this is the Pinot Grigio moment. He's a server at a high-end restaurant, and the person, she orders Pinot Grigio. I won't say any more. I won't spoil it for you. Listen to it. It's a lot of fun. And it has a great ending.
I have a degree in sculpture from Rhode Island School of Design. So naturally, I now have 7 years' experience waiting tables. I actually love serving tables. Like, I love giving people an exquisite dining experience, and food has always been a really big thing for me. And you can actually make a ton of money as a server if you have the right job. But there's a catch. All of your money comes completely from tips, which means you have to be intelligent, you need to be efficient, you have to seem happy, and when shit hits the fan, because it always does, you have to apologize. You have to say, I'm sorry, is there anything I can do for you? And the stuff that you have to deal with as a server is absolutely ridiculous. One time during a busy service, I had a woman pay for a $35 meal completely in change. I had one dude who ate a 4-course meal alone and refused to pay because the restaurant was just a little too hot. I had a table try to set me up on an actual arranged marriage with their daughter who was there. And you deal with this shit all the time, but all you can do is smile and nod because you need the job. You need to get paid. But I went to art school, so I have this problem with authority, I guess. So when I was in senior of college, Providence, Rhode Island, I got this really great job at a high-end Italian restaurant, killer food, really, really good staff. I was walking out with like over $200 in my pocket every night. They had this rule where if a table didn't finish their bottle of wine, you could cork it and take it home. Great rule. It was awesome, but there's still... You have this job where every night it feels like you're dying a little bit. So one night, we're working in the restaurant, and I am deep in the weeds. And basically, that means that shit has hit the fan. And you cannot make all of your tables happy. It is a triage situation. It is absolute chaos. It's like I'm running around, it's halfway through the night, and out of the corner of my eye, I see this woman come in the door. And I know this woman is going to steer this ship into the iceberg. I see this woman, and she is so visibly intoxicated. Like, she just reeks 20 feet away. She's with 2 really stylish gay gentlemen that are walking in with her, and she stumbles over the table, barely makes it there. She flops down in the seat, and I'm like, all right, I'm going to deal with this. So I run up, and I say, how are you folks? My name is Otis. I'll be your server tonight. these two dudes are very visibly judging me because even though I was wearing my uniform, I guess they could tell I was a slob on the inside. And this woman's like, listen, Oscar. We want bread and olives, and we want you to come right back. I'm like, all right, I'm Oscar. Okay, so I go get the bread and the olives, and I bring it back, and I'm running around the restaurant, and I'm going by her table, and she grabs my arm, which you don't do. And I'm like, I'm sorry, miss. How can I help you? She's like, I want an order. I'm like, fantastic. I'll be right with you. And I'm running around because, like, table 5 needs 2 packets of Splenda, and table 9, kid spilled chocolate milk all over his dad's steak. He's pissed. This woman starts yelling across the entire restaurant, Oscar! And everyone's so furious at me and her and the whole thing, so I'm like running over. I'm like, yes, miss, how can I help you? She's like, listen, Oscar, I want this Pinot Grigio, because it's from my favorite region, but I don't want to taste any peaches. I'm like, all right, miss, this particular Pinot Grigio does have notes of peaches in it, like it says right in the menu. I want this Pinot Grigio, but I better not taste any peaches. And I go, and I put the Pinot in, and, like, it comes to her table, and I'm running by again, and she grabs my arm again, and she shoves the glass of wine into my face, pours the wine on my uniform. Smell this. What do you smell? Peaches. Peaches. I said I didn't want any peaches, Oscar. Dudes are loving this. They are dying. And the whole restaurant is in flames. And I know that this woman isn't even going to tip me. I don't benefit at all from this. And I know I should apologize and say sorry and walk away. But I snapped, and I thought, I'm going to sell this woman the most expensive bottle of wine on the goddamn menu. The Bodega Nemia Malbec, which is a $450 bottle of wine, because I know these two dudes aren't drinking, and if she has another sip, she's going to have to get her stomach pumped. And I am not usually good at selling wine, but for Peaches Lady, the shit was on. So I said, miss, if you didn't like that Pinot Grigio, I think I have something that you'll really enjoy. And it was a masterpiece. It was like a ballet. I was like, miss, this Malbec has notes of mocha and dark plum, and you can feel the smoke. And the vines were coddled from a young age by a man named Raphael who sung the grapes to sleep every night. And since you know your region so well, you'll know that the soil in the Rio Negro Valley is exquisite. And these dudes did not see this coming. And she is entranced. And I said, miss, this Malbec is simply an experience. And you seem like the kind of person who knows that life is too short to let these experiences pass you by. We'll just take one bottle of the Malbec, Oscar. Bottle comes to her table. We open it up. And she has a sip and she passes out on the table. Her fine gentlemen put her arms over their shoulders, and they drag her out the front door. 2:30 a.m. that night, I leave the restaurant. I made no money. I was exhausted. But I did walk the beautiful streets of Providence, Rhode Island, sipping Bodega Nemia Malbec straight from the bottle.
So there it was, the Pinot Grigio moment and her demand for no peaches. And he couldn't get out of it. Well, he did get out of it. But we thought that he couldn't get out of it. And that was the stuck moment. And that is the stuck moment that you're looking for whenever you tell a story. But why stop at one story or two stories? We had the meningitis story. We had the Pinot Grigio moment. Let's go to Tim, who talks about procrastination. And yes, you love this story as well. It is from a TED Talk, and it is about procrastination, so you can see it, and it's more visual than audio-based. But it does pretty well in audio as well. Let's look for the stuck moment.
So in college, I was a government major, which means I had to write a lot of papers. Now, when a normal student writes a paper, they might spread the work out a little like this. So, you get started maybe a little slowly, but you get enough done in the first week that with some heavier days later on, everything gets done and things stay civil. And I would want to do that like that. That would be the plan. I would have it all ready to go, but then actually the paper would come along, and then I would kind of do this. And that would happen every single paper. But then came my 90-page senior thesis, a paper you're supposed to spend a year on. I knew for a paper like that, my normal workflow was not an option. It was way too big a project. So I planned things out, and I decided it kind of had to go something like this. This is how the year would go. So I'd start off light, and I'd bump it up in the middle months. And then at the end, I would kick it up into high gear. It's just like a little staircase. How hard could it be? Just walk up the stairs. No big deal, right? But then, funniest thing happened. Those first few months, they came and went, and I couldn't quite do stuff. So we had an awesome new revised plan. But then those middle months actually went by, and I didn't really write words. And so we were here. And then 2 months turned into 1 month, which turned into 2 weeks. And one day I woke up with 3 days until the deadline, still not having written a word. And so I did the only thing I could. I wrote 90 pages over 72 hours, pulling not one but 2 all-nighters. Humans are not supposed to pull 2 all-nighters. Sprinted across campus, dove in slow motion, and got it in just at the deadline. I thought that was the end of everything. But a week later, I get a call. And it's the school. And they say, "Is this Tim Urban?" And I say, "Yeah." And they say, "We need to talk about your thesis." And I say, "Okay." And they say, "It's the best one we've ever seen." That did not happen. It was a very, very bad thesis. I just wanted to enjoy that one moment when all of you thought, "This guy is amazing." No, it was very, very bad.
And there you have a stuck moment with Tim Urban as well, where he's got this 90-page thesis and he's got 3 days to go. And that's what makes it interesting. When you get to that point where there's a wall, you're stuck, there's no way to go. At which point you may ask, why do we have to have stories like this? Why can't we have good stories, just happy stories? I mean, there are whole books like Chicken Soup for the Soul with happy stories. And I'll tell you a happy story. Well, it's sad to start with, but it gets happier. A friend of ours who lives in Hungary, she just lost her father a few months ago. And what Renuka did was she got on chat with her and they had a little back and forth over Facebook Messenger. But then Renuka decides, okay, I'm going to send her a chocolate with a note. And she sends her this chocolate, this note, and this crane, this origami crane. Well, there's been this whole pandemic and everything has slowed down. Slowed down to a point where we would send a chocolate and it will reach in a week, and now it takes a month. But recently the chocolates have been reaching in a week because everybody's, or at least some of us, are traveling again. And so the chocolates are reaching every place on the planet, but they're not reaching Hungary, or so it seems. So she checks up with the husband and hasn't reached. Next week, hasn't reached. Then finally, yesterday, the husband writes back and goes, "We got the chocolate. We got the package." But before they can open the package, their daughter comes home from school. And at school, her friend has made her a little kind of gift. It's a paper crane, an origami paper crane. You know where this is going, isn't it? The friend opens our package, she sees the note, she sees the chocolate, and the origami crane. And I wasn't there, but I suspect that the whole emotional roller coaster of all of these few months came back in one moment. And she must have been happy and sad at the same time. And as we're listening to this story, well, it's a happy story. It makes us feel good. The question is, why don't we use all of these happy stories on a regular basis? And that is because if you heard a second story like this, you think, wow, that's so cool. But a third story and a fourth story, and you start to lose interest. And therefore, when you're writing articles and you have to create stories or you have to put in a case study, you have to weave in that whole storyline. And you have to remember that occasionally you can tell the story of how a company started out with nothing and then suddenly there is this fairy tale ending. But that's not the story that everybody wants to hear. Even kids want to hear Cinderella over and over again, not because of the fairy tale ending, but because inherently they know that something's going to go wrong. And if you've sat with a kid, they will point out to you, they go, look what happens now. That's what you're looking for. What happens now? And we'll finish this podcast right now with a benchmark. When you're telling a story and you stop, you know where you got stuck. But if you stop and people say, so what happened next? That's when you know you're at the stuck moment. That's when you know you've got that stuck moment in your article, in your story, in your podcast. And that's the beauty of storytelling. We've covered quite a few aspects of storytelling in these podcasts, and some of them almost after each other, so you might want to go back and listen to some of them, because that'll help your storytelling and it'll help you create thrillers and occasionally happy stories. Which brings us to the end of this podcast, so let's find out what's happening in Psychotactics land. One of the things that people struggle with the most when they're starting up is the psychology. So there you are, you have a job, or you have some kind of business, and then you want to transition somewhere else. And usually you get this spiel from everybody, which is you can get 1,000 customers, you can get 10,000 customers. And of course, we have to buy into it because we're desperately looking for something that we can hold on to. But when you go through many of these courses, you find yourself feeling more foolish than ever. Because you can't ask for a refund, because you don't know what to do. There's no strategy, and the strategy that they might have given you is a bit creepy. And what's really missing is to know the landscape, to know the psychology of starting up. What do people do? How do you get your clients? What are clients thinking about? Do you even need a new product or service? The answer is no, by the way. And that's what the psychology of starting up is all about. On June the 3rd, which is not so far away, you can get your copy of The Psychology of Starting Up. So if you want to get there, go to psychotactics.com/startup. That's one word. And of course, you'll get on the waiting list. Now, there are only unlimited copies and you have to be on the waiting list. Otherwise, you can't get there. So go to psychotactics.com/startup and get on the waiting list, and you'll see how the psychology plays a crucial role in that you have all of that buffer, that understanding of what's needed to get going. By the way, if you're ever on this podcast and you're driving and you go, I can't remember what he just said, but I can remember startup, you can go to the Psychotactics site and there is a search bar on the top right-hand side. And you clickety-clack and type startup and you're there. You'll find it. Which brings us to the end of this podcast, and that's it from Psychotactics Land. We'll see you in 5000 BC. Oh, what is the one thing that you can do today? The one thing that you can do today is to listen to at least 2 or 3 stories. And maybe they're bad stories, maybe they're not so great stories. You think, oh, what, this story sucks. But what you'll notice is that the stuck portion is either too quick or there is no stuck portion at all. And that's why the story seems so bland, so boring. Well, that's it from me from Psychotech's Land. Bye for now. Bye-bye. Still listening? You remember last week I lost 20,000 of my photos? Well, I didn't lose it, but when we transferred it from my Lightroom business account to my personal account, it got locked. The business account got locked. I couldn't access it. Nobody on chat, and I spoke to dozens of people on chat. And it took days. It went from Thursday to Friday, Friday to Saturday and Sunday, which was their weekend, and then Monday, and then Tuesday. Nothing's happening. At which point they're telling me, you have to wait, because now we have escalated. We have escalated this ticket and there is nothing we can do. Notice that stuck position? There is nothing that all of those people who are supposed to help me can do. And I have to wait for this mysterious person who's somehow going to respond, and they don't respond. And it's Wednesday, and by this point I've even contacted the CEO of Adobe, and there's no response. At which point I get to Messenger, Facebook Messenger of all things, and someone comes online and he sees the situation. And what do you know? The escalation team has already done something. We just don't know what they've done. Now, we won't go into a lot of details, but it's still not in my account. I still can't see the photos. About 15 minutes to 20 minutes later, everything has been resolved, and this is before breakfast on Wednesday. How exciting. And then a few days later, I get an email from the Adobe CEO saying, you've been with us a long time. And I have. I've been with them for like 25 years now. I used to use Photoshop 3.0, which used to run on a 386 with 4 megabytes of RAM, not gigabytes, megabytes. And he says, okay, fine. Sorry for all the trouble. Here you go, 9 months free. 9 months free. Okay, that was a happy ending, I guess. But there you go. That's the ending to the last episode that we started in the last podcast. So go and listen to that if you don't know what I'm talking about, but you kind of know anyway. Hope you don't get stuck. I hope you do in a way. Bye for now.
Free audio post-production by Alphonic.com.